Hi Year 11, I'm going to go through the poem You Will Know When You Get There by Curnow. On the surface, this poem is simply about a man going to pick mussels at the end of the day when the sun is going down. However, as we read it, we realise that there's a much deeper meaning about death and perhaps the inevitability of death. So before we begin analysing the language, I wanted to start with the structure because the structure is quite important for this poem. So as you can see, it's relatively regular in terms of our couplets, pretty much the whole way through until we get to this irregular last stanza where the couplets are broken and we have this third line with a singular word, fisher. So we'll come back to that when we get to it. So something is broken here. There's a change. So the regularity of the poem is broken at the end. And something very obvious as well is the enjambment used throughout this poem, meaning that there's no punctuation at the end of the majority of the lines, and often the lines are broken quite randomly and the lines continue on at different points in their sentences, in their lines. And if you just turn it round for a second, I might have to turn our camera around, you can see that there's a certain ebb and flow to this poem, which you could definitely link to the idea of it being about the ocean itself, and later on we'll come to how perhaps that represents the ebb and flow of life and death as well. Okay, so let's start with our first couplet. Nobody comes up from the sea as late as this, in the day and the season, and nobody else goes down. So we have the repetition of nobody here. We've got a sense of a lack of something or a lack of presence, perhaps quite a solitary location. And nobody comes up from the sea as late as this. So we perhaps have the idea that whatever is happening is not usual. It's out of the ordinary. As late as this, in the day and the season, and nobody else goes down. So something about this poem which you should definitely mention is how ambiguous not only this opening is, but pretty much the whole poem. It's not supposed to be clear or obvious what he is talking about at this point. Our poet is removing a huge amount of imagery or description for a purpose. We are left wondering what is happening. We, as the reader, become quite curious to this opening of this poem. And nobody else goes down the last steep kilometre. Wet metalled where a shower passed, shredding the light which keeps. Okay, so nobody else goes down the last steep kilometre. So the last steep kilometre, last meaning the final. So perhaps we are at the end of the journey as we meet this poem. And steep, just suggesting perhaps a sense of danger there. Now, wet metalled is a rather strange image and description. And this could be read in several ways. The wet metalled, perhaps the steps or the path that this person or whoever is walking down could be wet and metalled, or it could mean the sand on the beach and how it is both wet and then the sight of it with the sun shining on it becomes metalled or metallic. Where a shower passed, shredding the light which keeps pouring out of its tank. Okay, so we have quite a detailed description now of this rain shower, of the weather, and so we can assume we've got the use of pathetic fallacy happening here. So a shower passed, shredding the light. Now shredding could be read as quite a violent verb. A shower of rain is not a storm. It's quite gentle. You'd assume it's quite gentle, and it passed as well, so it's temporary, and yet it shreds the light, which seems to me quite violent. And quite a strange choice of a verb. A shower passed, shredding the light which keeps pouring out of its tank in the sky. So again, quite a strange image and metaphor here. So the rain is now pouring out, or keeps pouring out, of its tank in the sky. So even though we've had a description of a shower passing, we've got this conflicting and contrasting verb of pouring, suggesting it's continuous, suggesting that it's more than a shower. And now it comes out of the tank in the sky. So we have this almost military term of rain, which links nicely to shredding, that violent verb. So it's pouring out of its tank in the sky through summits, trees, vapours thickening and thinning. Too credibly, by half celestial, the damned reservoir up there keeps emptying while the light lasts over the sea. Okay, so we have a huge amount of enjambment here, suggesting this continuity, this pouring of the rain is symbolized with this continuing line in this poem. So it's thickening, it's thinning, there's constant change. And then too credibly, by half celestial. So again, we have quite a strange description. We have this religious imagery here of this heavenly link. We assume it's still talking about the rain, but it's only half celestial, and that's the most important part. It's only part of heaven. And so there's an incompleteness here, which might link later on if we're going to talk about religion. And then we have this quite powerful contrast. So we have half celestial, and then we have the damned reservoir. So a clear juxtaposition between between heaven and hell. And perhaps that's our explanation of why it's only half celestial. The damned reservoir. So it's simply talking about the sky and the atmosphere creating the rain. The damned reservoir up there keeps emptying while the light lasts over the sea. So again, we have that continuity of the shower that passed. It's both pouring and it keeps emptying, and it's thickening and thinning. So it doesn't seem in this description that this is simply just one shower passing. And then if we read the final line, keeps emptying while the light lasts over the sea, where it gathers the gold against it. And this is actually taken from an As a Pound poem, and the original quote is, "In the gloom, the gold gathers the light about it." So here, the way Alan Curnow has used this, it seems that there's some kind of conflict, perhaps. So the light is lasting, even though this rain is trying to, perhaps, as it said, shred it or remove it. And it lasts over the sea, and it gathers the gold against it. Now, we don't know exactly what the it is, but it seems like the light is the strength here, and it's gathering the gold, the light. I put here the wealth or the rich imagery. And so I'll add there to the strength and power, which seems to go against the sea, and it seems to go against the rain as well, and against the shower that's passing. The light is bits of crushed rock, randomly glinting underfoot. Now again, you have very simplistic language at this moment in this poem. The light is bits of crushed rock. It's almost quite colloquial, casual language here. Randomly glinting underfoot. So even though we've had this quite strong and powerful image of the light lasting and continuing through this seemingly quite strong rain and gathering the gold, here it becomes bits of crushed rock. So it seems to perhaps be a bit weaker here. Randomly glinting underfoot. So the randomness there is quite interesting to think about if we think about half celestial. So the bits of crushed rock have no particular purpose, they're just random. And the half celestial perhaps suggesting that there is no God or power creating these natural cycles, and in fact it's just quite random and futile. And they're glinting underfoot, wetted by the short shower. So again, a little bit of a confusing image created, because we've had this half celestial dammed reservoir that continues to keep emptying the rain, and now it's just described simply as a short shower. And down you go, and so in its way does the sun which gets there first. So here we have the first use of direct address, and we're not sure who the speaker is at this point. And down you go, and so in its way does the sun which gets there first. So you and the sun are almost together, taking this journey downwards together. Now, of course, literally this is a man going to pick mussels, but if we want to explore it further, which you should do in your essays, going down and into some kind of darkness with the sun getting there first, it could show, you know, that finding light, finding truth, or does it show that actually this person is finding heaven, as we would link light to? Boys, 2 of them, turn campfire lit faces. A hesitancy to speak is a hesitancy of the earth rolling back and away. So we've got a change in focus here. We've got 2 boys, assumingly they're on the beach, and they turn campfire lit faces and they're hesitant to speak. So this is could be seen as a pivot of this poem, because it's a quite a different tone and change in our focus. And their campfire lit faces, we've got kind of this childish youth and perhaps naivety or childish fun, childish joy as they're on the beach, and yet they're hesitant to speak. And this hesitancy of the boys to speak becomes a metaphor for the hesitancy of the earth. So some larger power is not speaking either, and it's rolling back and away behind this man going down to the sea with a bag. So if the earth is hesitant and it's rolling back and away, perhaps it's not going to help this man, just like the boys are not going to speak to him or help him. So there's a lack of help, there's a lack of kind of communication. And perhaps if we go back to the half celestial, this again, if we're talking about religion, is it that there's no God, there's no higher power looking out for this person? They are going to meet their death no matter what, and nobody will help them. Behind this man going down to the sea with a bag. So we go back to that very simplistic language. It completely lacks any detail whatsoever. It's a man with a bag going to the sea. We don't know what he looks like. We don't know what type of man. At this point, we don't know why he's going to the sea. We don't know what sea he is at. So just a complete lack of detail. And again, going back to what I said at the beginning, it's really important that you point stuff like that out. It's a very ambiguous poem. We're not supposed to know the meaning of it. And if you talk about that in your exam, you'll get marks. And then we learn his purpose, to pick mussels. And by this point, we're 3/4 of the way through the poem. We've had some amazing imagery here about half celestial and the dammed reservoir and the tank in the sky. And the language changes, and it's so simple, and it almost makes this job that he is traveling to do quite trivial. Having an arrangement with the tide, the ocean to be shallowed 3.7 meters. So here we almost hear the man's voice because he's running through what he needs to do, and we get these very accurate measurements, these technical measurements. Perhaps it's the man thinking about the routine that he goes through when he picks mussels. 1 hour's light to be left, and there's the X-crescent moon sponging off the last of it. Okay, so we've got the final hour of light. And if we want to go deeper, we can imagine it's the final hour of his life as well. And there's the X-crescent moon sponging off the last of it. Okay, so we've got the moon in conflict with the light again. We have this constant conflict between light and dark. And the moon is trying to take the light of the sun. A door. And then we have enjambment here, and we pause for a second and we wonder, what is this door? because we're in the ocean at this point. So again, we have a very confusing image given to us. And again, it's supposed to be ambiguous. A door slams, a heavy wave. A door, the sea floor shudders. Down you go alone, so late into the surge, black fissure. Okay, so a door slams. So at this moment, again, we've got this very confusing image. It's unusual, it's out of place in the ocean that we've been introduced to. A heavy wave. Okay, a door, the sea floor shudders. So we realize that this door is actually a metaphor for a wave. And if it's a door slamming, we can imagine it's closing. And if we want to go a bit further than that, we imagine that this is probably death coming. Perhaps it's the door of heaven. Down you go alone. Again, that direct address makes this really a really powerful ending, because the reader is being spoken to directly as if it is them. Down you go alone. So we've got that isolation, which has been introduced to us throughout this poem. So late into the surge, black fissure. So a really quite depressing end to this poem. So we've got the lateness. So we've got the fact that he's isolated and alone in his death. The fact that it's so late. So that's, again, quite an ambiguous term. Is it because his death is late? He was meant to die earlier? Or was it simply that he is dying because he went to the ocean to pick mussels too late in the season, like it said right at the beginning of this poem? And then we have that final image of surge black. And we haven't had the colour black yet. And so we end on blackness. So if you were to have a question about the tone of this, this is quite a hopeless ending. It's a depressing ending. And there isn't much positivity to that at the end. Okay, thank you for watching.